Hello, and welcome to the Kathleen Spracklin podcast. I am a woman on a mission to gather a cadre of writers, thinkers, and teachers who are transforming the world, one character at a time. And it all starts with one thing, a deep understanding of human motivation, why people do what they do, and the forces that drive them. To gain that understanding, I am mining the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy to make you a better writer. This is episode 88, The Role of Understanding in Active Reading. Understanding is a rather interesting phenomenon that I've been pondering lately, and I've been wondering whether or not it's an actual overlay over the top of knowledge. I've been wondering how it comes about in the human brain and to what extent we've studied the moment of understanding, and I'm not getting very far in that analysis. So wanting to get a little bit more of an insight into it, I was taking a look at a book that I revisited quite recently, which is the book by Mortimer Adler and Charles Van Doren, How to Read a Book. And this is a very, very classic book about, how to actually do some pretty deep styles of reading. It's very, very comprehensive, but two things really struck me with regard to understanding and the very concept of understanding. In the one case, they make the point that once you purchase a book, it's your book, and you should feel free to write in it. And it gives a lot of reasons why you would want to write in a book. And one of the chief reasons is that it enhances your understanding. Okay, that gives you a pretty good idea of what's going on, because if you think about reading a book and you're not taking notes, for my part, I prefer taking them on file cards and filing them in my Zettelkasten rather than underlining a book. But if you think about then, he's talking basically about the fact that we are quite capable of reading a book and feeling that we're taking the book in without really achieving understanding. And that's a pretty important clue as to really what is the nature of understanding. So it's something that we can go through, we can pick up the facts, we can recognize what we see on the page, and we might not achieve any specific level of understanding. That was one clue. Another clue came to me a little later in the book when they're talking about analytical reading and what happens when you're reading a book that's basically over your head. Well, what does it mean to have material that's over your head? It means that it's material that you're reading, but you're not gaining an understanding because it's a little bit out of reach. Once again, that gives us a pretty good clue as to what is going on in this understanding stuff. And it's very interesting that they're now going to be giving some very, very practical mechanisms by which you can tackle a book that's too difficult for you and still manage to gain the understanding. And a real key thing that they talk about in this chapter is the idea of coming to terms with the author. And by that, of course, understanding the key words that the author uses and being very clear on what the author means by those words. And in fact, point of fact, that's exactly what I'm really trying to do with this concept of understanding. It's a word that's commonly used. It's not an unusual word. It's not a strange word. We talk about it casually, so we must all have a pretty clear idea of what it means to understand something, what it means to come to an understanding, what it means to have a sudden understanding. And all of these things to me give clues as to what understanding actually is. Is it a brain function? Is it something on a higher plane? Yesterday we chatted briefly about the concept of materialism versus is there the presence of anything spiritual, and went off on a track having to do with things like how much is a human valued under each. But there's another aspect of this as well, and that's the question of whether or not is understanding a biological process like memory formation. If so, is there a special place in the brain where it is stored? Do we lose it and gain it with respect to information? Can we lose the underlying information and still have the understanding? It's all a very interesting question. If we go back to the concept of bringing in any of the spiritual concepts, Thomas Aquinas lists understanding under the gifts of the Holy Spirit. And if that's the case, then it's an outside gift. And understanding if it is a gift, then we can make ourselves amenable to it, but we cannot bestow it upon ourselves. So there's another divide between a materialist approach and a spiritual approach. Where does understanding come from? So it seems to me that because if you're taking a materialistic approach, which we're basically we're approaching this from the standpoint of the intersection of psychology, theology, and philosophy, and not where they widely differ, we're looking more probably towards the materialistic explanation. So if we're looking for the materialistic explanation, then we really need to ask the question, where is understanding housed in the brain? How does understanding differ from memory? And can we remember understandings and recall them, or do we have to re-understand them when they come back? And anyway, these are rather ideas that I'm trying to get down to things that are very foundational in the character traits, because if understanding is a gift, and certainly people differ in the degree to which they seem to be capable of understanding, are we talking about individuals who have different skill sets, or are we talking about individuals who have different capacities, or both? So this is just a little bit of musings as I'm trying to center myself on this problem. Thank you. Good night.